Good morning, everybody. Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District Representative Tom Tiffany is our very special guest today, Friday, July 15th, 2022. For Dryden.com, I'm Ben Dryden, and of course, you're watching Breakfast with Tiffany, a monthly live video podcast with our representative where we discuss all things going on in D.C. and the 7th Congressional District. We do these once a month, and you can find a recording of all of our previous chats on our website at drydenwire.com, on our Facebook page, or on our YouTube channel, just youtube.com/drydenwire. Also, if you have a question for the congressman, or if you have a topic that you would like for us to discuss, please let us know in the comments. Tom, good morning, sir. It's National Be a Dork Day today. So there's that.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah. So how are you going to honor being a dork day today? Because I'm a total dork. I just don't know how I'm going to honor it today.
Well, all my honor goes to you then.
Oh, no, man. Oh, and good morning, Gay. It was her birthday yesterday. Happy belated birthday, Gay.
Happy birthday, Gay.
All right. So it's been, you weren't able, so we usually do these shows on the second Thursday of every month. And for I think the second month in a row now, you weren't able to be here yesterday. And it must be like a DC thing because I'm looking at you and you're all like grown up and dressed up. Must be a work day for you today. So we can get into that in a little bit because that's like DC stuff. But first, I've seen you around, not just on social media, but I've seen you here at the Spooner Parade. Tell us about all the things you've been, all the events that you've been going to.
Yeah, leading up to this week, we had a couple weeks off from DC, which is always a good thing. And of course, over the 4th of July, did lots of parades and stuff. Me and my team, we actually did 6 parades on the 4th of July. We start at 9 a.m. in the morning and we finish at 7 p.m. And it was a blast.
Yeah, I'm sure they
And
appreciated that.
yeah. And then last weekend, amongst the things that we did was go to the Spooner Parade. A little bit of a detour, right? Because of the construction that's going on downtown Spooner.
Yeah.
That is going to look great
Yeah.
when that is done. And having the main drag through Spooner all fixed up and
Yes.
New pavement, actually cement, concrete, and it looks like new sidewalks, the works, right?
I know, it's going to be awesome. So I'm like one of those weird, dork people, I guess. I love construction. Now, I mean, I don't love the construction in terms of all the stuff, but when I look at it, I don't actually, when I'm driving around all the detours, I don't think, ugh, this is so horrible. It's not that big a deal. I love it because I love it when it's finished and you can see it and you're driving on it and it's, oh man, this is nice.
Yeah. And by the way, this really creates a big inconvenience for those downtown merchants. You can still get to their businesses. Just work your way around it. You can still get to those businesses, and they need your business now more than ever because construction of a major extent, like is going on right now, it really does disrupt their businesses. Go do some business with them and help them out here through construction.
Yeah, 100%. So aside from the parades, and again, it's been a month, so before the DC stuff, but the 7th Congressional District area, which is a very large area, and you have been in Northwest Wisconsin. Again, people can follow you on Twitter, on your Facebook page. You put a lot of these posts up, or maybe your team does. I don't know who does it. But you've been kind of everywhere, and we've talked about that before. You are a very active and engaged congressperson. So what else have you been doing in the area?
One that I would mention just before I took off for DC this week, I went to the opening of Farm Technology Days. That is in the 7th Congressional District this year. That's an annual event, statewide event. It is a big deal. It used to be called Farm Progress Days, called Farm Technology Days now. And it's down, let's see, at the Rail Farm in near Loyal, just south of you guys,
Yep.
south of Highway 29.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, they had the farm all fixed up and thousands of people going to Farm Technology Days this year. And it's always a big deal. And it was so great to see it hosted here in the 7th Congressional District this year.
Didn't I see a press release? Maybe it was on your Telegram thing, your Tiffany Telegram that you sent out. And I sent it for the newsletters for everybody. I thought I saw something about a post office. Or 2 post office.
Yeah, we've proposed that there be a renaming of 2 post offices in the district, one in New Richmond, one in Neillsville. That's in the process. It takes the sign off on all congressional members in the Wisconsin delegation in order to do that,
Hmm.
and we've gotten that. And now we're just seeing if we can get that passed into law, and there will be a renaming if that happens. And it's to recognize, in this instance, a couple veterans who served our country so bravely. And people can get the story from either reading the telegram, or they can contact my office and read about these people who truly were war
Yeah.
heroes, that we want to rename these post offices
Yeah.
for.
So again, yesterday I'm sorry, we're being joined by 7th Congressional District Representative Congressman Tom Tiffany, and you were off. No, I'm sorry, not off. We didn't do our show yesterday when we normally do it. It looks like you're at, work, in DC, unless you just have that room set up in your house, which wouldn't surprise me. I'm kidding. So what were you doing yesterday?
Yeah, so this week I sit on two committees, Judiciary and Natural Resources, and we've been very busy, both voting on legislation as well as having hearings. Yesterday, I spent the morning down in the Judiciary Committee, where we were having a hearing in regards to the Roe versus Wade decision,
Yes.
which I should
So we should
more
probably talk
accurately
about
is
that.
the Dobbs decision, that affected Roe versus Wade.
Yes, we should probably bring that up. Well, right. So,
Yeah.
obviously, where do you want to go with that conversation? In what you said yesterday, you were talking about some of that. Was that part of the hearings that you were having those discussions on?
Yeah, it was a hearing in regards to, what's the world going to be like post Roe versus Wade, and I would just add a couple things on that issue. Is one, the question was posed, is with the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade, does that outlaw abortion in the United States? And as one of the witnesses said, no, it does not. Does this prevent a can people still have abortion? Can women still have abortions? And the answer is yes, they can. And really, for me, what I'm trying to do is just impart information to people, because what the decision that was written by Justice Alito in the Dobbs case, really what it did is it just invalidated Roe versus Wade,
Mm.
which was put in place in 1973. Roe versus Wade did not have a genesis as a result of legislation. It was just basically a 9 judges that made a legislative decision, because there's not a constitutional right to an abortion. It does not contain that in the founding documents. So therefore, it's up to the people's representatives. And really what it does is it returns the decision to the states. And the states are now going to decide. And there's many states that allow abortions yet. And so they can still do that. Now, in my case, um, people would categorize me as pro-life. I believe life begins at conception. And as an example, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago when I was in the state legislature, we passed a 20-week bill, what we called a pain-capable bill, that a fetus can feel pain at that point. And we believe that a life can be saved, and it's been proven that it can be saved. And with the advancements in medical technology, just in a practical sense, we're able to save those unborn children at less and less gestational ages. So at 20 weeks, we're seeing doctors saving those babies, even when they are delivered prematurely at like 20, 22 weeks. And so I did vote for that when I was in the state legislature. But anyhow, been having hearings about that. And of course, that's been certainly in the news after the
Hold on, if you
Dobbs.
don't mind me. So that was a Supreme Court decision, and now that means this goes back to the states. You're not on the Supreme Court, and you're not a state represent. I mean, you're not in Madison passing those laws there. So you're having hearings. What role does Congress play in this? Why are you having hearings?
Well, so we do not have the majority, and the uh, the chairman of the committee, Chairman Nadler from New York, he really wants to highlight this issue. I mean, it really is more about election year politics than anything.
Oh,
And I think one of the things that came out of the hearing this week that I actually find quite problematic is Chairman Nadler said, and I've not heard him say this on the record before. He said, "We as Democrats do not believe the Hyde Amendment should be in place." For those not familiar with the Hyde Amendment says that taxpayers should not have to pay for abortions. In other words, any legislation that we pass that funds, Medicaid, Medicare, whatever the case may be, that that funding from taxpayers not be used to fund abortions. And that's been the law for a long time, for a couple decades here. And Chairman Nadler said it is now the position of the Democrat Party, which I think he might be taking some license there, saying entirely for the Democrat Party, and he did repeat it yesterday also, that taxpayer funds can be used for abortion. I really find that to be quite an extreme position, because there's people that do not believe that abortion should be the law of the land. And why would you force taxpayers to pay for that, to pay for abortions? And the second thing I'd mention is we are voting this morning on, I think, two abortion bills. And one of them is to allow abortions in an unlimited sense, all the way up to birth. So in other words, up to 9 months of gestation. They're trying to pass a bill here, Speaker Pelosi, here today in the House of Representatives. The U.S. Senate voted on this about a month ago, and all Democrats except Joe Manchin voted to allow abortions in an unlimited sense. I mean, when you think about it, if you're allowing an abortion at 9 months of gestation, isn't that infanticide? I mean, to me, there's no doubt that that's a living human being. But anyhow, the Dobbs decision at the end of the day brings this back to the states, where they're going to be able to decide what their policy is, which I believe is what the law should be. Let the states decide. And by the way, there's states I'm going to strongly disagree with, like the state of New York, which they passed a law a couple years ago. If Roe v. Wade goes away, you can have unlimited abortions anytime.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's terribly inappropriate. I believe that is a life.
So is it part of the reason? So if somebody's listening to you and maybe they're a Democrat, they're not a huge Tom Tiffany fan, because kind of find out, not everybody, right, loves Tom Tiffany. Wouldn't they be able to just say that you're voting for that, or you're in support of this going back to the states? Because right now, Republicans, at least, I mean, it's election year, so we don't know yet. But as of right now, with the exception of the governor, that would probably look pretty good for Wisconsin. And it's a better chance to have more pro-life type legislation if this was in the Wisconsin state down in Madison, their decision. So it's kind of kicking the bucket, but you're kicking the can down the road, because I know where that's going to end up.
No, I actually think the primary reason that I support the end of Roe versus Wade is that it was decided illegitimately. It is not in the Constitution to have an abortion. So therefore, since it's not in the Constitution, then it should go to the people to decide via their elected representatives. Now their elected representatives are going to be able to do that. And I can point to consistency in regards to that. I talk many times about issues that the federal government shouldn't be involved with at all. I mean, they just simply shouldn't. The states should decide. For example, in regards to wolves, why do I advocate for the delisting of wolves at the federal level? Because I believe state wildlife managers should decide that. I believe the elected representatives in Wisconsin should do that. And this is consistent across a whole range of issues. And how I vote is that if it's not a constitutional right, then the people's representatives should be making those decisions.
Do you so Supreme Court's been a little busy, Wisconsin a little bit as well, ballot stuff. Do you follow more of these things? Are you involved in more, or is it more that's not really under the purview of being a congressperson or the 7th Congressional District Representative, but I follow that stuff anyway because I'm just interested in it? And either way, are there any other things from either Wisconsin or the United States Supreme Court that you've been following?
Oh yeah, yeah. Follow them very closely. You just mentioned in the state Supreme Court, they just ruled last week that ballot drop boxes cannot be used in Wisconsin. And with all the improprieties in the election in 2020, I think that's appropriate that those ballot drop boxes not be used. I mean, you think about Madison, where they were having voting in the park. Um, uh, Various the Green Bay situation, where you had a political operative that had three of the four keys to the central count.
Right.
All the Zucker bucks that flowed into Wisconsin, $10 million from Mark Zuckerberg, the billionaire, to in effect privatize our elections. And so it's good that the state Supreme Court ruled the way they did because it was not in the law. There's never been a law passed to allow ballot drop boxes. Therefore, they should not be used. It goes back to the people's representatives need to do this stuff, not a bureaucrat who just says, hey, for whatever reason, we need to do this, even though it's not in the law. That's not how a constitutional system works. There were a couple other decisions that came down from the federal Supreme Court that were really big decisions. One, building on the Heller case, and those people very familiar with Second Amendment issues, they'll know the Heller case from, I think that's back in 2005, which basically reiterated that people have a Second Amendment right to be able to carry a gun. And there was a decision that came down from as a result of a case in New York State. I think it was in New York State. And once again, the justices on the Supreme Court came down just like in the Heller case, and they were unequivocal. And they said the Second Amendment right shall not be abridged to be able to legally own a gun. The other one that I think flew under the radar screen a little bit was the EPA decision, which many people, especially many media outlets, portrayed this as a climate change issue. And while you could make that case because the direct result of it was in regards to action taken by the EPA trying to stop coal plants from operating here in the United States, it was actually much broader than that, in that it said, you executive agencies, when you're dealing with a major question like electricity production in America via a coal-fired plant, you have to have authorizing statutes from Congress to do that. They did not have authorizing statutes. It was the executive agency taking the power upon themselves. And so this, I believe, makes it very clear that any executive agency of federal government, you have to now point to a statute. If it's not in the Constitution, you have to point to a statute of why you're regulating the way you are. And this, to me, was a great decision for freedom in America. It was a great decision to make sure that the regulators and the bureaucrats, or what some people would call the swamp in Washington, D.C., that they're held accountable by the people of our country.
They've been busy. And I've actually saw a story, and you know what, Matt, I shouldn't repeat it because I don't remember where it was from. I'm totally going to repeat it anyway. I thought I'd seen something about getting rid of. People are like actually talking about, we should get rid of the Supreme Court. Have you heard anything? I mean, not like actual bills or anything, but have you heard rumblings about that too? Like seeing that around?
Yeah, I think there's actually bills that have been introduced, and
I didn't know that.
and there are a number of Democrats that are openly talking about that now. And usually what they say is we need to expand the Supreme Court because they don't like the decisions that were coming down. And it's so ironic because the same people, many of the same people, when decisions were coming down 20 years ago that they favored, they didn't say anything about, hey, we got to have more Supreme Court justices. And by the way, we conservatives did not say that either. We said that perhaps there should be different Supreme Court justices that will actually follow the Constitution. But they want to pack the Supreme Court because they don't like the decisions that are coming down. And it's unfortunate that they want to take that route simply because they're not getting their way.
Well, a couple weeks ago, my very precocious 12-year-old son, Kenneth, asked if he could get a butterfly knife, but it's not a knife; it's a butterfly. Same thing, but it's a comb. And like he's into the Rubik's cubes. He has like those professional tournament ones. He can do a Rubik's cube in like a few seconds. It's just nuts. So he just likes the idea of trying to learn something new, and we really don't say no to a whole lot. Really, I mean, but there's something off about that. I don't know, because the next progression would be maybe a knife. I don't know. Something about it kind of felt weird. So yeah, I think he even kind of suggested the same thing here in the house about either we need more parents so I have a better chance to get what I want, or just get rid of them. But we shot that down too, because that's not how it works, buddy. Smart aleck kid.
Yeah, for sure. And on a serious note, it's deeply concerning that the justices have now had threats on their lives.
Uh,
Um, we've seen in the case of Justice Kavanaugh that there was a person outside his home, came all the way from California, had weapons on him in his vehicle, and it's really unfortunate that it's become that heated. And I do have to say, uh, when Majority Leader, United States Senator Chuck Schumer, when he said, and he pointed at the Supreme Court and he said, "You shall reap the whirlwind of what you have done." To a certain extent, that puts a target
a little
on
bit.
those justices' backs. And I think people should be, especially elected representatives out here, should be a little more careful with that rhetoric.
There is a boy that's really small for some reason. Dave Armstrong, I believe that's Representative Dave Armstrong, he says if you can, no, if you have time, can you address the latest inflation numbers, 9.1%? More importantly, the month-to-month numbers, which shows more like 17%. I
Yeah,
think that
that's
would be.
a
I don't think he was asking me.
yeah. No, I think that's the number one thing that people are talking about across America. At least it's the ones that I'm talking to.
Mm,
And what Representative Armstrong was alluding to is 9.1% inflation on an annualized basis, and highest inflation numbers that we've seen in like 40 years. And it just continues this. These price increases. And the example I like to use so often, and you've heard it before, it'll be 2 years ago now, I paid 80 cents a
oh,
gallon for propane to heat our home. So many of us use propane in northern Wisconsin. Many of my friends and neighbors do. We were paying 80 cents a gallon. I just checked with my supplier last week, 230 a gallon, nearly triple. And that is what's driving inflation. And there's another part of the note that Representative Armstrong sent there, and that is that inflation is actually higher than that. And I agree with that. And I think it's been the case for quite a number of months that they're actually underreporting the level of
mm,
inflation here in America, and that it's actually in the double digits, because how the federal government measures it, I think, leaves out some measures that leaves out uh, some of the things and the increase in costs that we're seeing there. So it's certainly, to me, it's at least 10% or higher, and it's really affecting every American at this
mm.
point.
We have a question here from Frank. Why did you co-sponsor a bill to take taxes off fishing gear and ammo that will take thousands of dollars, it looks like, away from conservation efforts?
Frank, thank you so much for that question, because we've
Good job,
gotten
Frank.
that question from a number of sportsmen in regards to the Pittman Robertson Fund. So on every gun, weapon, ammunition, piece of ammunition, there's an excise tax on it, a federal excise tax, and that goes into something called the Pittman Robertson Fund. Those dollars are returned to the states, and they use it for conservation efforts. And as Frank is alluding to, those have really been important conservation efforts. So I signed on to a bill to end those excise taxes on guns and ammunition,
Got it.
because you have a Second Amendment right to buy guns and ammunition. Since when should we be taxing a right? I don't believe we should be taxing a right. However, I think the one thing that perhaps Frank and many others missed is that in that bill, we propose backfilling those dollars. And I would not agree to a bill that doesn't backfill those dollars that are going into Pittman Robertson currently. So, in other words, what I'm saying there, Ben, is that in order for a bill to go forward for me to support it, those dollars that Frank was alluding to that
Mm,
go to conservation efforts, including in Wisconsin, we would find an alternate source of money
got
to
it.
make sure that it's fully funded. Because I agree with Frank that those conservation efforts are really important.
Yeah. Here's another question. Could you possibly touch on how or why President Biden sent some of our oil reserves out of our country?
Yeah, I can't answer that question. I know President Biden is over in the Middle East as we speak, and he's over imploring the Saudis to pump more oil. And I don't know why he's going to the Middle East to do that, because he can go right here in America. He can go to North Dakota, he can go to Texas, he can go to Pennsylvania, he can go to all kinds of states, and we can get that oil, natural gas, and that energy that we need in America right here. I just don't, well, I do get it, because there's this fundamental transformation that some are trying to push on us, including in the Biden administration, that we're somehow going to go off from fossil fuels. I refer to it as the green fantasy. It is not in place to be able to use, we do not have the technology in place at this point to be able to do this unless we build all kinds of nuclear plants. So we can end fossil fuel use at this point, but you're going to have to build a lot of nuclear plants, because wind and solar doesn't do it. It's intermittent. At best, you get 20 to 25% production on wind and solar. I don't know how many people out there want to have their lights on only 20 to 25% of the time. Most of the
Mm,
constituents I know, they want to be able to have their lights on whenever they flip the switch.
yeah.
And we're really headed down a dangerous path here. We just saw a month ago where the regulatory agency for electrical production in the Midwest, including in Wisconsin, warned us for the first time that we are under the threat of blackouts in Wisconsin,
What?
because we're going to these intermittent sources of power and ending things like our coal plants, our natural gas plants. In response to that, two of our utilities announced that three coal plants in Wisconsin that they were going to close. They said, we're going to postpone that. And I'm going to be sending a letter here real shortly to leadership in Madison saying, you need to not just postpone these closures for a couple years. You need to postpone these closures for the foreseeable future. Otherwise, we are going to see blackouts here in America. And by the way, there are some already happening in Texas. And all you have to do is look at Western Europe and California to see the future if we continue to go to these intermittent sources of power, what I call the green fantasy, where you pay twice as much for electricity and the lights are on only half the time. Now, by the way, that's a little bit of hyperbole, Ben,
What?
but it's not too far off, because
Yeah.
California's had huge problems the last few years.
Oh yeah, a lot. Is there more? I want to ask you. The only thing I thought of that I want to bring up, because I think this will be the last time you're on for our monthly show. This will be the last time before the election. So I just want to kind of get your thoughts about elections, maybe that you're following. Is there anything else though that you, whether it's Supreme Court stuff or bills that you're working on, or anything else that you want to touch on before we moved into that?
No, I think we covered a lot of territory here.
Yeah. And by the way, thank you everyone for questions as well. So obviously the election, the primary election is coming up. Which races are you following and why?
Oh, following all of them. The ones in the 7th Congressional District. We have Assembly and Senate races that are going on, and it'll be very interesting to see who wins those primaries. And then, of course, we have the statewide races, whether it's Treasurer, Secretary of State, Lieutenant Governor, Governor, and the Attorney General's race. Watching all of them closely. I think, as most listeners
Mm,
or many listeners know, I did endorse in both the governor and the attorney general races. I endorsed Adam Jarko in the attorney general's race. I think he'd be a terrific. I think we have good candidates there.
mhm.
I think Adam is the best, and I did endorse former Lieutenant Governor Clayfish for governor. And once again, we have good candidates running. I just think that she would be the best governor of the field that we have here in the state of Wisconsin. But it's going to be not my decision to make.
Yeah.
That is the decision of you, the voters, who you want to see on the ballot come November.
You had endorsed Rebecca. It was relatively early in her campaign, but it was
2 months ago.
was it only 2 months ago? Was
Yep, two
Michaels
months.
in the race at that point?
Yes, we knew Tim Michaels was going to get in the
Okay.
race.
All right. I was just kind of wondering. So, and okay, here's kind of a silly-ish question, a dork question. So, when you endorse the Adam and you Adam Jarkow, and you endorse Rebecca, and then let's say there are more, somebody else wins those races, Eric Toney for the AG, and I don't know, let's just say Michaels for whatever governor. How does that work? Like when you go and you're at a fundraiser together, is it kind of awkward? Like, sorry about that guy, right? Is it kind of weird that way?
Yeah. The first meeting might be a little bit awkward,
Right.
and no doubt about it. But we have good candidates running,
Sure.
and whoever comes out of the primary, that's who I'm going to support. And I've done this in past primaries where I did not support the nominee to begin with,
Mm.
and but if that's what the people choose, then I'm going to support that candidate.
What do you have coming up here? Is it still you're in an election? I think you do have someone running against you. From my understanding,
Yeah.
is it wasn't considered like an actual challenger. I mean, it is, and I'm not trying to diminish the individual. I don't even know who it is, but it's not like a what most people would call a real threat. So, are you going out and helping other candidates over the next 3.5 weeks, or are you doing stuff for your campaign? What do you have coming up?
Well, for the next 3 weeks, we're here in Washington, D.C., so I'm very focused on the issues that we're dealing with out here, and which are very serious. I mean, the direction we see our country going in right now cannot continue because we're breaking America fiscally in regards to what's happening on the border, in regards to energy. We cannot continue on this course and have a prosperous, world-leading United States of America if we continue on this course. So I'm out here working every day trying to stop the big government socialism that has really taken over out here with, quite frankly, with the Democrats out here like Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden in charge.
I get the feeling you're not a huge Nancy Pelosi fan. It's a
Well,
gut feeling of mine.
yeah, I mean, it's Speaker Pelosi is not following what the House of Representatives is known as the greatest deliberative body that has, at least I was taught that as a kid, um, in the history of the world, where the people's representatives come together and they discuss issues, debate issues, and then they come to decisions. So many of the bills that we've seen come before us in this session of Congress, they didn't have hearings or they had obligatory hearings. There was not good debate. You look at the budget process. Speaker Pelosi does not have a good budget process going on. Now, to be fair to her, that's been going on for a decade with both Republicans and Democrats. But she could have done this, and really all the power is in her hands at this point, and that's not how the House of Representatives should work.
Would it ever change? Will it ever change? I don't mean somebody else to replace her with a Democrat or then potentially a Republican, depending on how everything works out. That's just the way it's going to be?
It needs to change. The speaker has always had a lot of power, but we as members need to make sure that we're retaining the clout that we have. I mean, I represent 700,000 people. They expect me to do my job, and that's what I plan to do. And I need to make sure that our voice is heard. In many of these instances, Speaker Pelosi has said, I'm making the decision, or there's only a couple of us making the decision. We're not even going to have hearings. That is not a deliberative democracy.
Tom, thanks so much for, obviously you're in D.C. right now, taking the time to come on and talk to us. I know you have a lot of things going on today, so we'll wrap it up. Any last words, anything you wanted to share?
Hey, I just hope everybody's enjoying summer. Summer's the greatest time of year. And I got to tell you, in the 2 years that I've been out in Washington, D.C., I have even greater appreciation for being in northern Wisconsin at this time of year because I really miss it when being out here in the sweltering heat of Washington, D.C. It would be much better to be up in northern Wisconsin, the land of pine trees and lakes and all the rest. And look forward to being home this weekend. And I just hope everybody enjoys summer.
And
It's great to be on with you again, Ben.
yeah, it's also the home of the headquarters of, what was it, Dryden Wire World Headquarters or something? Here,
Dryden Wire World Headquarters in northern Wisconsin.
there you go.
No doubt.
We're world famous in Spooner. All right, special thank you to our congressman for taking the time to make himself available and jumping on for a chat with us. Thank you for everyone for your comments and questions as well. I'll see you next Tuesday for our latest episode of Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy. And 1 week from today, I will be chatting with Republican candidate for Lieutenant Governor back on Will Martin. He will be back on. Until then, for Dryden.com, I'm Ben Dryden saying thank you for watching. See you, Tom. Have a great weekend and a blessed day. I think he was trying to say, I got to go. But I was reading the script. So, see you guys. Thanks, everyone.